Good evening and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. Oh well, on this special broadcast coming to you at a time when the fires of resistance burn fiercely across the valleys, hills, and streets of Ambazonia, the political climate surrounding the southern Cameroons today is nothing short of intense. We stand at a historic crossroads where the colonial deception of La République du Cameroon continues to unravel before the eyes of the world. While Ambazonians remain under the shackles of occupation, intimidation, and systemic violence, the spirit of Ambazonian resistance has never been more resolute. Today, as we bring you these critical stories, we do so under the weight of painful truths, but also with the clarity of purpose that has guided the Ambazonian struggle since October 1st, 2017. The news cycle is not merely a reflection of current events. It is indeed a reflection of a people's cry for freedom, for dignity, and for justice long denied. From the unlawful sentencing of a prisoner of conscience, Abdul Karim Ali, by a colonial military tribunal that dares to try civilians with no shred of legality, to the hollow theater of accountability where corrupt colonial officers briefly stand before colonial courts, only to be silently released and recycled back into the machinery of repression. We are witnessing, once again, the violent and deceitful modus operandi of La République. Their tactics remain consistent: abduct, extort, torture, and when the people rise to expose them, put on the mask of legal order to silence dissent and appease the international gaze. But the truth cannot be hidden, and the resilience of Ambazonians cannot be crushed. Meanwhile, in the diaspora, Ambazonians face a new threat under the veil of immigration reform. The United States' decision to revoke the TPS, temporary protected status, for the generalized Cameroons risks sweeping Ambazonian refugees into deportation pipelines, returning them to the very regime that hunts and kills them. This movement in this moment alone calls for vigilance and united diplomatic resistance to ensure that the oppressed are not once again lumped together with their oppressors. This is the state of Ambazonia, under siege, yet unbowed. Every story we bring you tonight is a thread in the fabric of Ambazonia's liberation journey, from political repression to international injustices, from fake accountability to the brave voices rising against it. Tonight we report not just the news, but the lived realities of a people fighting for their right to exist as a free and sovereign nation. Stay with us as we dive into tonight's coverage, because in Ambazonia, every headline is a testimony. Every voice, a bullet in the war for truth. And every silence broken is a step closer to freedom. Stay tuned as we bring in the prime headlines. And these are the prime headlines on Undaunted tonight. We see the Colonial SDO for Mezam has said that though funds are available to construct Bamenda city roads, the contract cannot be awarded. You might wonder why. Well, La République also slams life jail on Ambazonia's prisoner of conscience, Abdul Karim. Colonial forces in Buea to be persecuted after torturing and extorting Ambazonian civilians. How accurate can that information be? We see on the African scene Rwanda granting safe passage to the SADC forces, as well as rubles soaring to record high, becoming world best performing currency. Well, stay on the news as we bring in the rest of the news in detail. we could say there is no hope that the dilapidated roads in the city of Bamenda will be improved upon soon, knowing their pattern. Well, this implies that Bamenda denizens still have to suffer for a long time navigating the horrible city roads. At the 2024 management account sessions of the Colonial Bamenda City Council that took place on Wednesday, April, councillors quizzed the city mayor, Achombog Tambeng Po, on the prolonged start of construction works on the city roads. The in-house slave acknowledged that the situation was more his competence, shifting the question to the Colonial Senior Divisional Officer, Simon Emil Moore, to still have control over councils considered as the last institutions in the devolution of powers to the local communities. The Yaoundé regime's place the senior divisional officer to lord over councils as the supervisory authority, stiffening autonomy. Now, as an excuse on the part of the colonial SDO to why in the city of Bamenda are still the same despite the availability of funds since last year, while the roads in the city of Bamenda remain the same. We see that Emil Mo has said it is only when octogenarian dictator Paul Biya approves compensation for the affected along the roads concerned that the contract can be awarded. Ambazonians in Bamenda are begging for city roads while the La Republique neighboring town of Bafoussam has all roads tarred. The delay and the continuous excuse justifying why works have not been started on the Bamenda city roads is an intentional act by the colonial regime to paralyze Ambazonia and stifle development. The sum of 30 billion was announced in 2024 as geared towards the construction of Bamenda city roads. For months now, there has been no sign of work on the ground, and the colonial minister of urban development, who made the announcement, has gone silent. Oh, well, looking at the conversations of road in Ambazonia, it is no news. Most of the roads in Ambazonia have been dilapidated and in deplorable state. We have with us in the studio tonight a guest of amazing personalities who would join us and dive into the conversation of what it is about the Ambazonian roads that they still remain deplorable. But before we get to our guest, we have another report of concern. We have to take a look at the prisoner of conscience. After much ado and years after, we see that the Colonial Military Tribunal in Yaoundé, capital of La Republique, has sentenced Abdul Karim Ali to life imprisonment. This ruling follows his abduction from Bamenda 3 years ago. Popularly known as a prisoner of conscience, Abdul Karim has always been vocal about the injustices of the colonizers in Ambazonia. But on April 16, 2025, a military tribunal in Yaoundé sentenced Abdul Karim Ali to life imprisonment. The decision was made in his absence, as he has not recognized the colonial tribunal's authority. Now, the sentencing of Abdul Karim Ali, a respected scholar, peace advocate, and political analyst, to life imprisonment by La République du Cameroon's military tribunal on April 16, 2025, only marks yet another dark chapter in the ongoing colonial repression of southern Cameroon's Ambazonia. This ruling, delivered in his absence, has sparked international outrage, further highlighting the systematic injustices inflicted upon Ambazonians who dare to speak the truth to power. Abdul Karim's story is one of resilience, intellect, and defiance, known for his non-violence advocacy. Abdul Karim was abducted in 2022 from Bamenda by La Republique forces without a warrant, due process, or any clear charges, only for him to later appear before a military court in Yaoundé. For 3 years, he has remained in unlawful detention, enduring torture, solitary confinement, and psychological trauma, all for peacefully demanding justice and the right to self-determination for the people of Ambazonia. His case, sadly, as pathetic as it is not isolated. It is only emblematic of a larger colonial playbook, which is silencing dissent, criminalizing identity, and suppressing the voices that call out the daily atrocities committed in the once independent southern Cameroons. We see a pattern of illegalities here which we like to look at deeply. From Abdul Karim's abductions to his recent sentencing, we see that the entire process has been marred by glaring legal and moral violations. We see the illegal arrest and transfer being the first illegality to his case. His seizure in Bamenda was done without due process, no warrant, no charges, or transparency. We see the second being a violation of civilian rights. Yes, civilian rights. Trying a civilian in a military tribunal blatantly contravenes both Cameroonian domestic law and international human rights standards. The rejection of tribunal jurisdiction as well. Abdul Karim, affirming his Ambazonian nationality, consistently rejected the legitimacy of the La Republic Tribunal, highlighting the illegality of prosecuting a civilian in a military court. The lack of fair trials as well. His legal team raised strong objections to the trial, especially in May 2024, challenging the jurisdiction of the court. These objections were all ignored, and a sentence was passed only a few days ago without his presence. We also see the inhumane detention conditions. His detention at the SED and now Kundegi Central Prison reflects the dire conditions Ambazonian detainees face: torture, overcrowding, denial of medical care, as we have seen so many Ambazonians die due to this lack of medical care, as well as prolonged solitary confinements to psychologically torture these arbitrarily arrested detainees. Now, looking at these patterns of illegality carried out by La Republique, you would agree that this report is more than a news brief. It is a mirror reflecting the ugly truth of colonial injustices. It documents the weaponization of law as a tool of repression by La Republique and the urgent need for international intervention for Ambazonians. It is a wake-up call. Abdul Karim's case serves as a symbol of the regime's fear of truth and intellectual resistance. It only highlights how no voice, no matter how peaceful, is safe under the current colonial setup. His life sentence is a desperate attempt by La Republique to extinguish the fire of liberation. But in doing so, they have only poured fuel on the flames of Ambazonia's collective struggle. Let's take a look at what sentencing Abdul Karim Ali to life imprisonment could mean for Ambazonians. Well, we see that the life sentence handed down to Abdul Karim Ali only underscores yet again the illegitimacy of La République du Cameroon's claims over the people of Southern Cameroon by prosecuting a civilian in a military court that he does not recognize. The regime not only violated international legal norms, but also affirmed the very basis of the Ambazonian liberation cause, that Ambazonia is a separate nation under occupation. This ruling also intensifies the urgency for international advocacy. The silence or slow response of the global community could only be interpreted by the regime in Yaoundé as a green light to continue its campaign of repression against Ambazonians. As such, there is a growing call for international actors to move beyond statements of concern and towards concrete diplomatic, legal, and humanitarian interventions. Within the Ambazonian movement itself, we see Abdul Karim's case presenting both a challenge and an opportunity. It challenges legal practitioners, human rights defenders, and political representatives to rise to the occasion and coordinate a more forceful legal and diplomatic response. His sentencing lays bare the need to document these violations systematically and build the case for international legal action. Moreover, this movement and this moment provides an opening to intensify pressure on the colonial regime through renewed calls for sanctions, United Nations inquiries, and referrals of La République's repeated breaches to international courts. The path to justice may be long, but each case, just like Abdul Karim, his case builds the evidence and moral momentum required to hold the regime accountable. Abdul Karim's imprisonment is not just a punishment for one man. It is indeed a sentence imposed on truth, freedom, and resistance. But it also exposes the desperation of a crumbling colonial regime that sees its grip slipping away. It is now up to Ambazonians and allies of justice everywhere to ensure that the injustices does not go unanswered. Sadly, we're unable to have our guests join us in and deliberate on this, but hopefully in our subsequent Undaunted bulletin, or better yet, on the weekend briefings, we hope to delve into these deeper, looking at the legalities and importance of topics like this. But then still in Ambazonian, on the home front, we see in the wake of the brutal armed conflict in southern Cameroon, we see that many citizens, Ambazonian citizens, fled persecution, violence, and political repression under the regime of La République du Cameroon. In recognition of these humanitarian concerns, the United States government granted temporary protected status to nationals from both Cameroons in 2022, offering a lifeline to thousands of Ambazonians escaping war and seeking refuge. However, recent developments have raised serious concerns. The broad label of Cameroons has left Ambazonians vulnerable once again, as the United States now moves to strip the designation entirely on the current President Donald Trump's deportation policy, a decision that fails to account for the unique and still dangerous circumstances faced by Ambazonians. Now, if this policy is enacted without distinction between the oppressed and the oppressor, we realize that countless victims of La République's colonial war could be deported back to the very territories where their lives remain at risk. And we're talking about Ambazonians being deported back to the war zone after having this temporary protected status. Well, tonight, the President of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, Dr. Samuel Ikome Sako, will get an audio from the President, Dr. Samuel Ikome Sako, where he addresses the Ambazonian nation and the international community on the implication of this development and what it means for the people of Ambazonia in the diaspora. Well, now let's just take a listen.
Fellow Ambazonians, last week, towards the close of the week, we witnessed a story from the press that the Trump administration is contemplating the cancellation of the TPS, the Temporal Protective Status, for the people from Cameroon, legally identified as Cameroonians here. This decision will affect about 7,000 plus people from Cameroon. And I think almost half of that number will be Ambazonians, if not more. Now, the Trump administration ran on immigration. Campaign was based on immigration. The kind of Mr. Trump kind of believed that he had a mandate from Americans to solve the problem of immigration. So we knew from the beginning that this is going to be tough, because when somebody runs on an issue and he wins election, that issue becomes front and center. It would take a lot of push behind the scene to alter anything on that agenda. So we started before and after the inauguration to take certain actions. Well, the American government has 3 arms of government, and so there are still some actions that can be taken within the executive or legislative push or the judiciary to make sure that come June that decision or that order is not implemented. So, but I say this to say that in the days ahead, we are working behind the scene, and those people who don't like it, who are able to do something, can go ahead and do their own openly. But this is a time that we are inviting everybody to come on board and do our best to make sure that we help some of our people, just for the sake of helping our people. Because to tell you the truth, some of the people who are in this category, they are not the ones supporting the struggle. And some of their relatives care little or nothing about the struggle. If I'm appalled to hear that about 7,000 plus people are beneficiaries of the TPS. Imagine if just every one of them was concerned about this struggle and could give us even $10 in a year. Yes, you know how much that would be? $10 times 7,000 people. That's about $70,000. If I were the one in that list, and I know that I'm a beneficiary of this struggle, that means my stay in America is directly dependent on the prosecution of the war that is displacing people in Ambazonia. I would make efforts. I would make contributions. I will not just pay lawyers. I will not just pay flight tickets. I will make sure that those who are prosecuting the struggle have what it takes to do so. But unfortunately, I can say that that is not the case. But as a government, you are like a shelter. You cover everyone when it is raining. You cover everyone, the good, the bad, the lazy, the not so concerned, and everybody, even the that one a teen camp, you still cover them. That is what is expected of us. But let this be an eye-opener for some people to think again. If we have to do legislative action, and I can assure you that in the days ahead, there will be a legislative action that will be taken on this matter. That will cost us little or nothing. But a judicial action will be expensive. So what do these people and everyone who is a beneficiary who is not supporting the struggle, what do they expect us to do? What magic do they expect us to do to help them? You have to help the government to help you. You have to help somebody to help you. You have to at least give the person a hand before he can pull you out. So there are also throw the challenge to those people who castigate every effort we make, and even the ones we are making now will be castigated. I know that. Instead of castigating, this is the time to show leadership. If you can do, you know what to do, just go ahead and do it. It is results speak louder than words. But show proof of what you can do, not how bad the person doing it is doing it. A critic cannot write a book. Most critics don't write books. They only talk about the books that have been written. But this is the time to write your own chapter so that people can read it. If you can, let's go ahead, engage the legislative action, engage both the Senate and the House, where there is a certain majority that can help. Engage them. Engage the State Department. Engage them. This is not the time to click and share. This is the time to do footwork and engage people, not for the camera, but for action that will be taken that will change the outcome. So I just want to tell Ambazonians to stay calm, or we can only do what we can do. We can only do with what we have, and what we don't have, nobody, even God, will not hold us accountable. For whatever we have and whatever connections we have and whatever resources that we currently have, we are going to do our best, at least to see how to help alleviate the suffering of our people. But if whatever the outcome, we brace for it. One thing is clear. It is Ambazonia's freedom that will set us all free. I believe that all of us are in a prison. It's just the size of the prison that differs. The people on the ground, those in jails, they are in a smaller prison. The people in Ambazonia are in a bigger prison. Those of us in the diaspora are in even a very big prison. The walls are so big that we don't see ourselves to be in prison. Here and there, things remind us that you are not in your country. There's no country you call yours except Ambazonia. So I encourage us to make our efforts continue to support what we are trying to do and we are going to do. Days ahead, I will not make any announcement, but when it is convenient and when certain things happen that I think you should know, I will not hesitate to make you know. Thank you very much, and God bless.
Well, we know the president will be up to speed, especially when it comes to things that concern Ambazonia. And of course, the temporary protected status is one of those pivotal things at this moment. And it was very expedient to hear the president talk on the way forward, looking at the situation with the United States and its plan to deport Ambazonians and the both Cameroons at large. Well, we look forward to delving in deeper to see how the Ambazonian leadership plans to diplomatically engage with the U.S. authorities to separate Ambazonian TPS case from those of other countries, given the continued war and persecution back home, as well as in the event of mass deportation, what mechanisms or international partnerships can be activated to ensure the safety and legal protection of Ambazonians forcibly returned to hostile territory, something that we do not even pray for. But then in our subsequent bulletin, we'll look deeper into this. But for now, we'll head on to the rest of the report on the national scene. Well, we see another charade before we get into the global report. We see another charade of justice. And of course, it is perpetrated by the colonial forces and the colonial administration in Buea. We see once again La République staging a familiar performance, one that appears to enforce justice, but in truth serves to shield its colonial agents from real consequences. This time, several gendarmes, soldiers, and police officers operating in Buea, chief town of the Atlantic Zone in the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, are reported to be facing legal actions for the torture and extortion of a young Ambazonian civilian. But beneath the surface, the story reveals the same old playbook, repression, abuse of power, and deceptive legal posturing designed to protect the perpetrators while masking the state's deep complicity. The victim's ordeal began on April 10th when he was returning home from a football match near Buea University, where he was intercepted by Colonial forces at a mixed control post in Bitwingi, not far from Moko Omnisport Stadium. Despite presenting his ID card as an Ambazonian, he was accused of being affiliated with the Ambazonian struggle, an accusation often used as justification for arbitrary arrest, abuse, and even worse, in other worst cases, death. Now we see the situation escalating rapidly in his case as the Colonial agents left their checkpoints and went directly to this young man's residence. In his absence, they interrogated his younger brother and demanded to see his wife, who was away in Douala. Then they ransacked his home and discovered a sum of money, which marked the beginning of this extortion scheme for this young innocent man, masked as law enforcement. Now the victim was dragged back to their post, stripped naked, brutally tortured. Now this torture is not even an isolated or spontaneous one. It involved every officer present, suggesting an organized and routine approach to dehumanizing Ambazonian civilians. What followed was more than brutality. It was the execution of a well-known strategy of financial exploitation disguised as justice. Now, after the beating, the Colonial officers forced him into a taxi, paid for by the same victim himself, something he was forced to do. And they drove him to the bank to withdraw more money because they saw some more in his house. Interesting. Now, when the transaction failed due to an incorrect PIN error, they contacted his friends demanding that they send mobile money transfers to meet the amount that they had targeted. And in the end, they extorted well over 400,000 franc CFAs from this young Ambazonian, a sum collected and shared among the officers present, just like a loot after a raid. The next day, the young man obtained a medical certificate and filed a complaint with the Regional Human Rights Commissions. The commission launched an investigation, which led to the identification of several officers. They were summoned and confessed to their actions, even offering to return the money. Of course, they initially only offered to pay part of it, claiming others involved had since left the station. It was only after pressures from the commission that they repaid the full amount to this young man. While this may seem like progress on the surface, the reality is more sinister. This proposed prosecution, like many others before it, only serve as a smokescreen. The colonial regime of La République has long perfected the art of appearing to hold its security forces accountable while ensuring that no real consequences follow. Time and again, such cases are processed with media attention or human rights scrutiny, only to quietly disappear behind closed doors, with the culprits released, reassigned, or left untouched. This case is far from an exception. It is the rule. Ambazonian civilians are routinely abducted, extorted, and tortured, and worse cases killed, often without even a whisper of accountability. Now, in rare cases where complaints are raised, the La République's response is not driven by justice, but by the need to uphold a facade for international observers. The regime offers stage court cases to pacify public outrage while the system of impunity remains intact. Now, what this reveals is a deeply entrenched system of oppression, where the institutions meant to protect civilians are the very tools used to violate them, where trials are not about justice, but about shielding the colonial regime's image, and where Ambazonian lives are routinely treated as disposables. The appearance of justice in this case is merely part of La République's strategy of deception. As long as colonial officers continue to act without fear of real punishment, as long as extortion and torture remains tactics of colonial governance, and as long as the regime continues to stage accountability while preserving and protecting its core of impunity, there can be no justice for Ambazonians, sadly. But Ambazonian lives indeed matter. The only question is, Can justice be found in the colonial systems that was designed to erase them? Well, we'll get more of that in our subsequent bulletins, more of this report as we have been having. But for now, we'll leave all of the national reports and head on to what is happening on the African scene. Stay with me. Now, on the global reports, we see the United States government has proposed a plan to reduce its diplomatic footprint in Africa, Europe, and Asia, sparking concerns about the potential impact on American influence and relationship with key partners. The plan includes closing embassies in European countries like Malta and Luxembourg, as well as consulates in various cities across the globe. Now, critics argue that such moves could undermine the United States' diplomatic relations, economic partnerships, and efforts to promote democratic values. They point out that other global powers such as China are expanding their presence in these regions, potentially leaving the United States at a disadvantage. Now, the proposed closures have raised questions about the long-term implications for the United States' interest, as well as its global stability. As the plan moves forward, stakeholders are closely watching the potential effect on international relations, trade, and security. The United States government has framed the proposed change as part of a broader effort to streamline operations and reduce federal spending. However, the debate surrounding the plan highlights the complexities of balancing fiscal responsibility with diplomatic and strategic interest. And then we see in Rwanda, it grants safe passage to the SADC forces. Rwanda has agreed to provide safe passage to Southern African Development Community, the SADC forces exiting the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, this development comes after the SADC requested Rwanda's assistance in facilitating their withdrawal. The SADC forces have been deployed in Eastern Congo to address security concerns. However, they have faced challenges and casualties in recent months, straining relations between Rwanda and South Africa. The Rwandan government has confirmed the agreement with Foreign Affairs Minister. As you see, the Rwandan government has confirmed the agreement with Foreign Affairs Minister Olivier Nduhungirehe, starting with the safe passage, stating that the safe passage is in response to the SADC's request. Now, this development may help ease tensions between Rwanda and SADC member states. The agreement could have positive implications for regional relations and facilitate a smoother withdrawal of SADC forces from the conflict zone. Well, that was it on tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. But before we go, let's take a quick look at the recap on Undaunted tonight. On Undaunted tonight, we took a look at the Colonial SDO for Mezam, who has said that though funds are available to construct Bamenda city roads, the contract cannot be awarded. We see La Republic slamming life jail on Abdul Karim, Ambazonian prisoner of conscience, as well as colonial forces in Buea, prosecuted after torturing and extorting Ambazonian civilians. We also saw the president's speech on the temporary protected status for Ambazonians in the United States. We see on the African scene Rwanda granting safe passage to SADC forces, as well as the ruble soaring to record high, becoming world's best performing currency, and the state of the United States tariff impact on other countries. And that was it for Undaunted tonight's news, bringing into the news untold stories. On behalf of the technicians and my co-anchor, we say thank you for joining in tonight. We leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.